This is Pledge Week, so JP and I are going to be doing a separate video soon talking about how our Patreon page will need pledges, and we wanted to, or I at least wanted to, discuss a headline that has been going around a little bit, especially in the entertainment sector. This is about the Obamas purchasing a $14.85 million mansion on 29 acres in Martha's Vineyard. And based on the map that I was looking at, it looks like it has easy access to a beach, most likely a private beach. So a couple of things really just kind of didn't sit quite well with me. And to offer a comparison, in San Francisco where I lived, a block from where I lived, there was a mansion. And I would say it was probably about 8 bedrooms, maybe 3 or 4 bathrooms. And it was a restored church that was rehabbed and turned into a mansion. And it sat on a corner lot in the middle of a four-way intersection. Unlike the Obama's mansion, it has no pool, it has no private acreage, it has no easy walking distance to the beach. I mean, it was a 15-minute bike ride to the beach from my neighborhood, but no private walkway, no easy access to a private beach. And it was in the middle of one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in San Francisco, very crowded. So traffic going, many different directions in front of this mansion. And like I said, it was in the corner lot of a four-way intersection. And this mansion went for somewhere between $5 and $6 million. So if you compare the two, I mean, we're talking about a $14 million mansion that has 29 private, acres surrounding it, 7,000 square feet, private access to the beach. So either the housing market is in a slump or something else is going on. But I would say that for $14 million to get all of that, compared to the mansion in my neighborhood, which was in the middle of a very densely populated area of San Francisco, cars, bicycles, lots of traffic on a four-way intersection, and this mansion went for $6 million. You can see that maybe the market isn't what it used to be even 3-4 years ago. So that's something I wanted to bring up. The second thing I wanted to bring up too was that you see a lot of these agents of the state. Some people refer to them as the ruling elite. Some people refer to them as the 1%. I refer to them as agents of the state, whether they are politicians like Barack Obama or whether they are social media CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg, or tech experts like Mark Zuckerberg, or they are entertainment / news agents like Oprah Winfrey. So each of these people represent a different wing of the state: propaganda, technology, social media, and then politics. And just to use these three as an example, of course, there are many more besides these three that have done the exact same thing, but I'm just going to focus on these three, as they have purchased multiple mansions, multiple properties throughout the world, many of which are either on islands or lie in coastal regions, are very close to the ocean, very close to the sea, surrounded by water. And so this flies in direct conflict with what we are being told about rising sea levels and global warming. Why is it that these agents of the state, which are out there purchasing all of these properties, multiple properties all over the world, are purchasing properties that are surrounded by water, or at least lie on a coastal region, or, have easy access to the beach, things like that. That doesn't make any sense. So there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance going on where you may say to yourself, yes, of course I believe in climate change and rising sea levels. And, oh yeah, and hey, take a look at this article. Oprah Winfrey and Mark Zuckerberg and Barack Obama just bought properties right along the coast. Isn't that great for them? They deserve it. And so you literally have two opposing thoughts in your brain going on at the same time. Why would these people be purchasing land and property that is so close to the coastal regions, like literally within walking distance or literally on islands, when we know that it's been scientifically proven that there's rising sea levels? Wouldn't they want to build or buy property or expand out, like up in the mountains? Wouldn't they want to do that? Wouldn't that make more sense? So, so there's that question. And so when you see these headlines that come across, which this headline about the Obamas purchasing the Martha's Vineyard property, it just came across my feed within the last 24 hours. It really got me to thinking about the subject of this, and in many different ways. And so I also wanted to talk about how another person that's recently been in the headlines owned multiple properties all across the world and was worth, millions, if not at least $1 billion. And that was Jeffrey Epstein. And when his properties went through probate court, it was tied up in a nice, neat little efficient bow, and everything was closed out very quickly. The properties that he owned did not go back to the public realm. They were not put up on the, out for the public to purchase. And that is because Jeffrey Epstein was an agent of the state. Jeffrey Epstein was owned by corporate interests. He was owned by the state. And some of it was good, some of it was bad. We know that his personal life was deplorable. We know that he had an addiction to sexualizing children, and that is bad. And that's ultimately why he went to jail. But wouldn't it have been nice if his property would have been made available to the public so that it could have sold, so that the attorneys for these victims of his could have said, hey, look, you can't put a price tag on this kind of abuse. This is stuff that these children are going to have to live with for the rest of their lives as adults, this terrible abuse that they suffered and this exploitation of them. But a few $1 million in their pocket could really get them some good therapy. Well, that's never going to happen, because the people that ran sort of the Epstein empire, if you will, they all had holdings and interest in his properties. So it all kind of went back to them. And so that's something that you have to think about when you hear things like Mark Zuckerberg owns 12 giant properties and 12, mansions and acreage all over the world, or when you hear Barack Obama owns yet another piece of property or purchased yet another piece of property. The people that he's beholden to, they work in tandem with each other, same with Zuckerberg. They have holdings and interest in these properties, and these properties need to be secluded. They need to be surrounded by water. They need to be off the beaten path. They need to be compounds with high walls. There's a story that came out earlier this year about Mark Zuckerberg buying two homes in the Lake Tahoe region, which is in Northern California, and they were each sort of they were the same homes, and they faced each other across a lake. Now, why would Mark Zuckerberg need to purchase two homes in Lake Tahoe that face each other? It's most likely, and they were extremely secluded, way up in the mountains. So again, we're talking about, people who are working in tandem with people like the Obamas and people like the Zuckerbergs and people like Oprah Winfrey. You know, they're working with them. They're part of their dynasties. They're part of their system. They're part of the popularity. They're part of, you know, what makes them who they are. And they're really running the show, and they're the ones that want to have access to these secluded, private, difficult to reach properties and mansions and things like that. And so you also have to remember, too, that there is another narrative that's going around. And you can find this narrative on a video that we did, a very silly, fun little video that we did called Greta Sails. And the narrative is that flying is bad, you know, that taking, that jet travel is bad, and that it's emitting too much carbon in the air, and that we should all be thinking of different ways to travel throughout the world. And I'm totally on board with that, except that I see that there's another agenda going on, and that Greta is being funded by billionaires. Her trip across the sea is being funded by the billionaires, and you can go to our YouTube page at Book of Hours on our YouTube page, and you can see 2 teaser videos that we did that kind of explain that. Or you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Book of Hours, and you can see the 3-minute video for yourself with a $2 donation per month. So that comes to about 7 cents a day. And so what we see here is a narrative that's being put out there for everybody, which is that, you know, traveling by sea is now the best way to fight climate change and to help save the planet. And so that's another reason why we might be seeing so many of these agents of the state purchasing, or at least we're being told that they're purchasing all of these properties in these you know, on these islands and in these coastal regions, because I guarantee you the next thing that they will have, you know, that they will have to purchase and that they will be purchasing and investing in are yachts and traveling mansions that travel along, you know, that float along the water, so to speak. So these outrageously expensive, you know, state-of-the-art yachts that they will be using to travel by sea, as opposed to being in the air as much. And so we also see that the airline industry is going through some major changes. Maybe they're losing their funding. Maybe there's an oil issue. Maybe there's a fuel issue. But pilots are striking. Airlines are having to cancel you know, privileged people who travel a couple of times a year over, you know, all across the world. All of their flights are being canceled. Well, a lot of their flights are being canceled. And it's a disruption in air travel. And air travel has become this sort of like thorn in the side of everybody. And it feels as though air travel is also on a downturn. Do you know what I'm saying? In general, I think people still fly a lot. A lot of people fly all the time. So I still think that tickets are being purchased. But the experience of air travel is not a fun one. And I think what's happening is that there is a narrative that's coming out there that's saying, hey, we need to travel by boat more. We need to do these things differently now. And the agents of the state and the agents of the corporate state that run the show here are basically, you know, making sure that they have all of their assets in order to push this narrative. So this is my speculation, and based on a few things I've read and a few things I've listened to here and there. But what we have are, you know, conflicting stories. The most obvious conflicting story is that there's a rise of sea level, which is detrimental to coastal cities and coastal towns and coastal properties. But at the same time, you see all of these, you know, fabulously wealthy agents of the state purchasing, you know, islands and purchasing properties that are right on the coast. So it doesn't make any sense when you really think about it. And also keep in mind that the economy, you have to understand how the economy works. All of these individuals that I mentioned, especially Oprah Winfrey, Mark Zuckerberg, and Barack Obama, they're not wealthy because they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps or they did well in school. In fact, they are not actually wealthy. They have holdings in things. They are part of larger organizations that have holdings in things like property and in things like stocks. And so you'll often see that property will be sold off when there's a downturn in the economy, or stocks will get dumped and things like that. And also keep in mind that, as much as I hate to use the term the deep state, there are, corporate factions and state factions within various governments throughout the world that really do run the show. And they need front people. They need the politicians, and they need the entertainers, and they need the social media whiz kids out there in the front, and the scientists out there in the front for us to sort of dissect and think about and look at and read all the latest about the goings on with them, right? So they're put out there in front purposefully so that these things can continue to happen, like the gobbling up of all of these properties. I mean, there are entire towns in California that have been emptied of people who were born and raised there so that these very wealthy people can come in, and there are not very many wealthy people that are coming in to move in there. It's secluded. It's going to be a gated community now. The public will not have access to it. So this is so what's with all the secrecy? What's with all the seclusion? What's with all this Mark Zuckerberg needing to buy islands, and Oprah Winfrey needing to put buying compounds that are far out in Hawaii, and Barack Obama needing 29 acres, and homes being purchased up in the mountains with all the seclusion, and towns being emptied of the townspeople so that a few people can move in and have their sprawling mansions and have all this seclusion. Ask yourself what that's about. I mean, I think I know what it's about. I think it has to do with an impending economic crash, and that those who have been good agents of the state and have been compensated for all of their work will be safe and protected, while the rest of us will be scrambling for survival. So I think that's what's really going on. And also keep in mind that when you're talking about Mark Zuckerberg, who has one child and a wife, why does he need 12 sprawling, expensive, multi-million-dollar properties all over the world? Well, he doesn't, but the various, agents that work with Facebook, like DARPA and various and other, agents of the security apparatus, various other organizations, they need access to private dwellings where they can have meetings and do things sort of off the record. We know for a fact that there are, many different types of factions that are not seen in the public eye that are running the show. They don't get New York Times articles published about them. They're not sprawled across People magazine. They're not, talked about in any kind of transparent capacity. Part of the bylaws of their organizations and their groups is that they have to remain confidential and they have to remain secretive. And so that's who's really part of this, expansive, swallowing up of properties that are very secluded and off the beaten path, so to speak. So just like with Jeffrey Epstein, when the shit hit the fan, so to speak, all of these different corporate interests and different government interests and even, academic interests, they all needed someone to fall on his sword, and that was why Jeffrey Epstein was in place. He was there to be their scapegoat. He was put out as the front man to be the person that fell on his sword so that all of these people that are guilty in one way or another, whether it's through racketeering or child slave labor, or even nefarious real estate deals, or breaking all sorts of, laws, that they're all going to get away with it because they just needed someone to scapegoat. They needed someone to fall on his sword. So they all have interests in his properties, and I use his properties, that term, very loosely. I don't think he had full ownership of anything. If he did, it would have gone back into the family name, and back to his brother or any family members he had. At which point, the lawyers for the victims would have then gone after Epstein's family. But now the lawyers for the victims don't have anywhere that they can go to find compensation, because all of those properties have been swallowed up by the corporate interests that held holdings in his properties. So this is why you need people like the Obamas and the Zuckerbergs and the Oprah Winfreys to swallow up all these properties and buy out, because it protects all of their corporate interests. It keeps the public from having access to who these people really are and who's really running the show. And it also keeps the public from having access to, say somebody tries to sue Zuckerberg for, being unlawfully fired from Facebook or whatever. All of his properties are tied up in holdings that have other interests that, and he can simply say, well, I can't really do anything about it. Yeah, sure, my name's on it, and yeah, sure, I'm the front man for it, but what can you do? Sorry you got fired. You can go get $400 a month with unemployment, after making $1.5 million a year at Facebook. You know what I mean? So that's what's really going on whenever you see yet another one of these agents of the state. The Obamas, they just purchased a $15 million property over in Martha's Vineyard. That's where your mind should go. It's like, oh, who are they covering for? Why are they lying and saying that, that we should all get away from the coast and get off of our islands, and yet they're buying property near the coast and on islands. So, this is the way that you should start to think. And I really appreciate the support and the feedback that I've gotten for the 2 Greta Sales teaser videos that I've done. Please go to our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/book of hours. And I hope that you have learned a little something from this message, and I look forward to creating more content with your help. Just for $2 a month, you can support our creative works, and it will make all the difference. It only comes out to about 7 cents a day. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later.